Yes, I know, free agency was nearly 2 weeks ago now, but I've been trying to wait and wait and patiently wait some more for the Kraken to make what's inevitably going to be their biggest move of this free agency period, in either signing Vince Dunn to a long extension for a pretty decent average value per year, or package him via trade to pick up, say, an Erik Karlsson type. But since that still hasn't happened, and the rest of the moves they made are getting farther and farther in the past, we're just going to go over what they've done so far, and I guess do another video when that eventually happens, likely as I'm uploading this video. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back for Kraken Free Agency 2023, and as expected, it's been a relatively quiet free agency period for the Kraken. They did have some guys that were free agents, but a lot of them were probably going to be too expensive for the Kraken, and even if they weren't, there are some guys coming up through the ranks that they'd like to finally give that chance at the NHL level that they're deserving of. And besides, even if it doesn't make for a particularly interesting free agency, this is now a team that just went to the 7th game of round 2 in the playoffs, and now is staying basically the exact same as they did last year, at least at the top end anyway, assuming Dunn gets re-signed, and will have one of their best players in their first-line center, Matty Beniers, with a full year of experience going into his full second year, having just won the Calder. By the way, congratulations, Beniers, on officially winning the Calder, although there really wasn't too much of a doubt, unless you're an Oilers fan, I suppose, and were trying to convince yourself that for some reason Skinner was more deserving. Anyway, the point is, it's hard to stay mad at the fact that a team that did that well the year before is staying pretty much the same for this upcoming season. Now, yes, obviously, that team last year did have a number of career seasons for a number of guys, including a few that are leaving, but again, that's just a new standard that's been set for those players that we can expect at least something close to that going into the future. And in the case of Dunn, is part of the reason that his contract negotiations are still going on, and at this point, they actually have an arbitration date set for a week and a half from now. So we might as well start where the Kraken started in free agency, on the defensive end, when they signed longtime Penguin Brian Dumoulin to a 2-year contract that will earn him just over $3 million per year. And essentially, Dumoulin is going to be a Soucy replacement who does leave via free agency. Soucy actually headed just across the border to Vancouver on a similar contract that'll earn him just over $3 million for 3 years with the Canucks. For Dumoulin, though, after having been drafted in the second round of the 2009 draft by the Carolina Hurricanes, he has spent the last 10 years in the NHL with the Pittsburgh Penguins, where, unlike what we saw from Soucy over the last couple of years, the offensive part of the game isn't so much his strength, although he did just set a career high in points with 25 this last season. He is much more a defense-first defenseman, and for those that were a little bit frustrated with some of the issues that Soucy had this last season, that might be a welcome change of pace there on that second or maybe third pair, depending on where the Kraken decide to put Dumoulin. And at 6'4" and over 200 pounds, what he also has for the Kraken on the blue line is a little bit more size. And size that he's not afraid to throw around either, as he has pretty much been good for, over the majority of his career now, at least a hit and a half per game, and when it comes to the seasons not affected by COVID, that's gotten him healthily over 100 hits in 4 of those seasons. And when he's not putting his body in the way of opposing players' bodies, he's putting it in the way of the pucks that they're shooting off at his net, where, once again, he has 4 seasons with over 100 blocks and is good for right around a block and a half to 2 block shots per game. So, somewhat similar to the style of play we've come to expect from Adam Larsson, just maybe not quite to that same level. He's a guy that we should expect to slot in right into that spot on the second line, or maybe third line, depending on whether or not they want to keep Borgen and Alexiak together, or move Alexiak to play with Schultz. Either way, Dumoulin does look like someone that will be probably playing more games than not for the Kraken this season, and from there we'll just see where the depth shakes out, as they still have Magna. They did manage to re-sign Cale Fleury for a couple of years for less than $1 million, and then there's always the chance of Riker Evans moving his way up to the NHL and getting some games there this season as well. Now, at least to this point anyway, that has been the biggest move the Kraken have made in this free agency period, or off-season now at this point. And actually, the second biggest move they made in that way is also on the defensive end, with the re-signing of Will Borgen, as he earns another 2 years with the Kraken, earning $2.7 million per year, which is a little bit more than I was expecting them to pay for Borgen. I was thinking somewhere in the range of $2 to $2.5 million, but it's not that much more, and I'm glad to see Borgen back for what he offers the team after a very good season for him there on the third pair. As far as any other moves the Kraken made, well, they did have some spots to fill up on the forward end, which some of that will come from their prospect pool, either Shane Wright or Riker Evans, and maybe a couple of new names coming up as well. But with 3 spots to fill after, not surprisingly, losing Donato and Sprong, both of them leaving for $2 million per year, Donato getting 2 years with Chicago and Sprong 1 with Detroit. And a little bit more surprisingly, and at least for me anyway, this was the biggest bummer of all the guys that left, in part because it was also the most surprising one, so I wasn't quite as ready for him to leave. But the Kraken lose Morgan Geekie to the Boston Bruins, as he'll be getting $2 million as well per year for 2 years in Boston. The Kraken, I guess, just not quite willing to go up to $2 million per year for Geekie and didn't want to go to arbitration and risk whatever he would have gotten from an arbitrator, so they let him go to free agency and he ends up going to Boston, which again did leave those 3 spots then for the Kraken to fill on the forward end. Or I suppose more 2 spots with Burakovsky coming back from injury, at least for as long as the Kraken can keep everyone healthy, which even though they were able to do that, and hopefully this will be the case again until pretty deep into the season last year, it's certainly no guarantee in this sport, and especially with the injury history of a couple of the guys, especially Schwartz on the forward end already. Anyway, there's some spots to fill, and you don't want to lean all the way on a couple of the prospects on their way up, like Shane Wright, or even Ty Cartier with what he did in the playoffs. Will definitely get every chance in the world to prove himself ready for the NHL and his rookie season here this year during the preseason. But you don't want to lean all the way on those guys having to play a full 82 games. So the Kraken picked up a couple of guys with a little bit more NHL experience. The first one being a pretty exciting, actually, pickup for the Kraken for a guy that's only going to be earning $1.5 million for 1 year so far. But he is the first Washington-born player that will play for the Kraken, as they pick up from Spokane, Washington, 24-year-old, former now Edmonton Oiler, Kyler Yamamoto. For Yamamoto, who did also play a few years with his hometown Spokane Chiefs in the WHL before being selected in the first round of the 2017 NHL draft by the Edmonton Oilers, 22nd overall, he has now played in at least part of 6 different NHL seasons, and at least 3 of those, including the last 2, has been good for roughly a half point per game, with his best season being the 21-22 campaign, where he put up 41 points in 81 games, reaching 20 goals and 21 assists. Now, yes, it's true, Yamamoto isn't the biggest player in the world at just 5'8", but I've always been a pretty big fan of how he plays the game, at least over the last few years while he's been in the NHL anyway, as he plays a pretty feisty game for a 5'8" guy. He's been over 100 hits already once in his year, and will throw that body around and get a hit or 2 per game. Not terribly, unlike a guy who's not that much bigger than him already on the Kraken at 5'9" in Yanni Gourde. So at least to me anyway, there's all sorts of reasons to like this signing in particular by the Kraken. Again, there's the fun aspect of him being the first ever hometown, or I suppose home state player to come play for the team. But it's also not really one that offers that much risk if things don't work out here, which obviously we certainly hope that they do. But it's just $1.5 million for 1 year, so if it doesn't work out, it's not that much of a cap hit, and you move on at the end of the season. But if it does work out, again, he's a first round or ex-first round pick, so the talent is certainly there, and I mean, at best, the Kraken could have just gotten them another Yanni Gourde in the making. Without the versatility of being a center, he is a winger, so he won't be playing in the face-off circle or offering maybe some of the leadership qualities that Gourde does. Maybe he will down the road, who knows? But either way, the same kind of tenacious, pesky play style that the fans of Seattle have really come to love from Yanni Gourde. And again, at least scoring-wise anyway, with that potential of a 20-goal player, heck, maybe even more than that if he gets more of a role in Seattle than he was able to get with the big top end in Edmonton. And then with the third and final signing that the Kraken have made so far anyway in this offseason, at least as far as players that came from other teams are concerned anyway, they get for the league minimum, $775,000 for 1 year, veteran center Pierre-Edouard Bellemare from the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, the former undrafted free agent from France has, well, he'll definitely offer a veteran presence in the Kraken locker room at 38 years old, but has also played a fair amount in the NHL, 660 games over 9 seasons. Now, he has had a bit of bad luck as he's been a bit of a journeyman over that time with being in the right place at the right time to win a Stanley Cup, as he played a couple years for Vegas, then 2 years for Colorado, and moved from Colorado to play with the Lightning the year after the Lightning won their 2 cups and the year that the Avs won theirs. So he was with the defending champs when his former team beat them to win the cup. Either way, hopefully the Kraken can, maybe it's a long shot, but be the team that finally gets his name on the cup. Either way, he's a depth player and has been throughout the course of his career, largely a fourth-line center, and would be that with the Kraken as well. Now, as you can see, he does not put up a whole lot of points. He has yet to record 10 goals in a single season, although he has had 9 3 times. But what he really offers the Kraken, and I'd have to guess the primary reason they went and got him, was he is pretty good in the faceoff circle with a career faceoff win percentage of 51.4, but has been well above that over the last few seasons. In fact, over the last 6 seasons of his career, he's been healthily over 50%, and just a couple years ago, he was over 60% at winning faceoffs. And if he can be once again over 50 for the Kraken, he would be the first player in team history to end the season with a significant number of faceoffs taken and having won more than half of them, or even half of them to start with. Now, yes, obviously if a couple of the Kraken prospects on the forward end, Shane Wright in particular being that he's a center, but Cartier obviously stands out as well, prove that they're ready to make that jump to full-time NHL player, and Yamamoto also proves that he's going to have a spot day in, day out on the forward end for the Kraken, then when this team is healthy, spots are definitely going to run out for Bellemare to be a consistent part of the starting lineup. But at the very least, even if all of that goes, well for the Kraken to make Bellemare more of a situational add into the roster, he does give them that option against matchups where teams are better at winning faceoffs, that they can put him in to have better chances in those situations. And even if he doesn't play a ton, it would also be kind of nice, with the experience he has consistently winning faceoffs, if he could teach some of the other players on the Kraken, young players like Wright if he's around, or Beniers for sure, but even the Wembergs and Gourds of the world, how to win a little bit more consistently in the faceoff circle, since that has not been something the Kraken have excelled at through their first 2 years of existence. Anyway, at this point, all we can do is wait and see how this season pans out and how these 3 new additions factor into the team as a whole. Dumoulin, obviously, I think would have a pretty significant role and hopefully play most of the season if he's healthy. And then Yamamoto, I think, has a good chance to play a good chunk of the season as well. And we'll just see how the Kraken decide to use Bellemare and his face-off specialist type of style that he will probably fill for this team. Outside of that, the Kraken did make a couple of other signings of guys that were already in the organization, mostly at the AHL level, as they get Lind re-signed to a 1-year, $775 million two-way deal, and also get for 2 years at $1.5 million, Joey Daccord re-signed, which that one in particular, I'm very excited to see, as, at least personally, I'm really hoping that Daccord can be a part of this organization going forward, maybe even the goaltender of the future. All I can say is he's a very entertaining goalie to watch, so if he can make that jump to the NHL, it would be fun to have him filling a more consistent role there. Of course, that brings up the question of what the Kraken do with Drieger, and whether or not something happens with him before the season starts. He just has 1 year left on his deal with the Kraken, so it wouldn't be that much for a team to take on, but again, there's still plenty of time before the season gets started, a couple of months between now and then. So we'll keep you updated as things go along. Until then, if you have made it to this point, as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments section, which of these players you're excited to see watch play for the team. Either way, your thoughts on the signing so far by the Kraken, how we're feeling about the still developing situation with Dunn, or how you're feeling about what Dunn signed for, or what the Kraken did with Dunn, when that decision is probably made, like I said, right as I upload this video. But anyway, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section, and until next time, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below to support the channel, and we still do have a couple other ones coming out. And yes, still working on that 5th episode of the History of Hockey, which will definitely be out here in the next few weeks. Until then, though, as always, stay safe out there. Be good to each other. God bless and go Kraken!